All right, good morning, everybody. It is Monday, November 8th, 2021, and we're going to get started here with our pre-market analysis on the S&P 500 futures market. It was not here on Friday of last week, so hopefully you guys had a good day there. And just looking at what's going on in the market, I mean, it's really just a whole bunch of the same stuff happening here, where we push to new all-time highs, we get some type of pullback, shallow pullback, and then we get bullish continuation patterns, and then the market continues to push. So really it's been 2, 3, 4 weeks here of essentially the same situation every morning. Let's go ahead and take a look at everything here. So we'll jump up to our ultra high time frames, take a look at the quarterly chart here. And the quarterly chart, I think, has had the same exact story for probably over 2 months now, maybe even 3 months. So looking real strong, no signs of exhaustion when we look up at the top end here. And then on our monthly, we kind of talked about this last week, the fact that we did pull back, get the push to new all-time highs, but RVI did not push to higher highs, just like price did. So we do have a situation where if this new monthly candle for November closes, the RVI closes where it is now at a lower high compared to the high we made back on the August 2021 candle. And then the next monthly candle opens and we start to actually get, if I could just draw this here, an actual push down. So we have that apex, we have that peak. Then we could go ahead and say we have bearish divergence, but it's going to take time for that to happen. So for now, everything else looks strong. Remember, even if this was to close the way it looks now, we'd still have to wait until December and then wait for December's candle to close before there was real confirmation up top. So we'll just keep in mind the potential for some type of bearish pattern to eventually form. Another thing to also kind of watch here is we drew in this trend line from the 2117 low back from the COVID correction, and then we drew from that to the lows that we were making as we kind of pushed out of that area. And as you can see, we held it for quite a long time. In fact, back for a few months, we kept talking about how we're still holding from the bottom end, or from the top end of the trend line, back in July, back in August, and then eventually we did get that pullback and we broke through. Now it'll be interesting to see, can we now break through the bottom end of that trend line and continue to push? It would be kind of a pretty situation if they did do this, where they came down, they broke below it, they came back up, and they essentially kind of pull back and push and never get through, and then get some type of failure down like that. But again, that's just kind of one scenario, something that would be kind of sexy to see them come up, not be able to get through the back end of the trend line and fail. But it's just one little thing I figured I would mention this morning. We'll see what ends up happening. It's not something that's really going to help out for a trade idea right now. And I'm trying to delete, there we go. So let's go ahead and move on down to our weekly chart. And on our weekly, now you can see we actually have that first potential peak on the RVI. Remember, we have to wait for the next bar, which is currently pointing down here on RVI. We need it to actually close like that in order to actually say we have a bearish divergence off the high that we can rely on. So for now, we'll mark it, and unless the story changes, remember, this new candle, this new weekly candle, is, it starts this morning, or started last night for Globex, and we'll have 5 more days of price action. So if we come up here and break the high at 47.1175, our new all-time high, then this RVI, which is pointing down right now, could actually end up closing kind of a little bit flatter up like this, or even continue to go straight up like that, and then we would still have kind of this straight line on RVI, which would not be something that we could really call a divergence pattern off of. We would have to wait again for it to come up and then have the next candle open and then close and get that peak. So just keep in mind that right now, assuming we don't break the high, the all-time high, and this new weekly candle actually does stay where it is now or start pulling back, we could have this RVI close the way it looks right now. And then we would have a bearish divergence off the high. Maybe by the time that ends up happening, maybe we'll get a nice daily bearish divergence, which we don't have right now. And then we would have a nice alignment of the weekly, the daily, maybe even the 4-hour. And then our monthly is still showing the potential. It's just going to take a long time to actually see the signal. So we could start to get an alignment like that. So there's our high time frames. Kind of spent a little bit more time on them because we are on a Monday here on a brand new weekly candle. So just to wrap those up, of course, our highest ultra high time frame still looks strong with no signs of exhaustion in the push. The monthly still, again, looking strong with that previous weekly candle or monthly candle, bullish engulfing candle there, looking strong, but we do have what could potentially be a bearish pattern if things start to sell off here coming into this week. And then again, the weekly, same thing. If this continues to sell off or stay below the all-time high, we could get a close like that and then have a bearish pattern to look at. So there's potential bearish patterns on the monthly and the weekly. Still looking strong in the quarterly. Keep in mind that the monthly and the weekly, even with the potential bearish pattern that could form, still looking very, very strong overall. And remember, from this weekly perspective, if we just zoom back, we did get bearish divergences off highs in this push, and there was some type of shallow pullback, but then the bulls jumped in and continued to push. So the situation right now could be very similar, where maybe we get a little bit of some a pause up here or some type of small minor correction, and then they just go ahead and take off again, as you can see after all these other previous bearish signals. So let's go down to our daily now. The daily is looking strong. There's no signs of exhaustion. The candle that closed on Friday was somewhat of a bearish looking candle with that huge wick to the upside, and then they ended up closing down at about 50% of the daily range there. So not the most bullish look. 1 second here, Steve. You might have a setting on your end. I'm pretty sure that's on his end because I can see the mic working, so I don't think it is me. Anyway, we'll see if Steve can get that worked out here in the next few minutes. But on the daily, looking very strong up here. No signs of exhaustion except for, again, that bearish wick that we have on this previous daily candle. And this was what I was looking at last night. So I got to the charts, fired it up, and I noticed how we had this really bearish looking previous candle. I threw up my 50% of the previous daily range, which was 89.75, and I kind of told myself, if in the overnight session, and it might be better to go down to a shorter time frame to look at this. So going into that overnight session for the Globex, I said if we held 89.75, there were 3 tests of it here within a point or whatever of the level, and then they got this failure. So going into the overnight session yesterday, I said to myself, if we can't get through that 89.75, we might be looking at a bearish Monday. However, in the overnight session, what do you know? The bulls jumped right back in and pushed right through 89, and now, as you can see, we broke through 89, pulled back, and then bounced essentially right off of it, and now here we are right now a little bit higher. So go back to my daily chart here. That's what I was watching, and so we have broke through that 89.75 and now pushing to, looks like, come up and test the all-time high. So maybe if that happens, we'll go back. That weekly is probably going to end up closing up here if it continues to stay like that throughout the week. Our 4-hour now, again, this is Groundhog's Day for about a month. Almost every morning we come in, it's the same exact pattern, and you can just see day after day, if we just go back one by one, you got a bearish off the high, a nice pullback with a bullish divergence off the low, and a continuation. Now, it wasn't exactly perfect. There's 1 or 2 situations where maybe you didn't get a nice bullish divergence off the low, or bearish off the high. But overall here you can see it's essentially the exact same thing as we go back here until you get, so looks like right around October 18th to November 8th. So just shy of a month where every morning we came in and essentially had the same exact kind of scenario. So looking at the 4-hour, got the two bearish signals off the highs from Friday, but then on the pullback into our overnight session here yesterday, we got a nice 4-hour bullish divergence on the candle that closed at about 7 p.m. Pacific, and then one that closed closer to midnight Pacific. So got the same situation on the 4, and then as we dial down to the 60, 30, and 10, we're going to see the same exact thing. So not necessarily helping us out right now. The 60-minute, in my opinion, didn't have any type of bearish divergence off the previous daily high. But then as you can see, as we pull back and we get these lows here, there's a buildup of bullish divergences. And now currently on this push, I would argue there's really no signs of bearishness on this 60-minute chart. So things look strong now. If we could wrap up everything on the high time frames, there's potential, if we look to the weekly and the monthly, of a bearish case that could form, but it's going to take a long time to see the signal. Otherwise, everything looks really strong, and when we get down to our 4-hour, we have a lot more of a, we get to the 4-hour and the 60-minute, we have a lot more bullish arguments off the overnight lows, and then the lows from Friday, then I would argue we have bearish off the highs right now. And currently on the push, there's really no bearish argument, so there's no exhaustion on this push. So I would expect a push up to test the all-time high sometime soon here. So let's go up to the 30-minute. And 30 minutes essentially just going to agree. Previous daily low, we got some bullish divergences back there. We on this major pullback on Friday, another bullish divergence, and then the overnight low. I think on the 30-minute here, we don't have the cleanest bullish divergence off the overnight low, but we do have it off of the previous daily low, and then that pullback that we got at the end of the session on Friday. So still looking pretty bullish up there. And then off the all-time high, we also don't have a good, clear 30-minute bearish divergence either. So the 30-minute and the 60-minute don't really have the clearest bearish divergence off the overnight high, the previous daily high, but every other time frame, including the 30-minute and the 60-minute, has bullish signals off the lows. So we're seeing a lot more of an argument for bulls this morning. And then our 10-minute did get a nice little local bearish divergence off the previous daily high. However, we have bullish divergences off of every pullback, off the overnight low. And so this morning we have, even though we have a very similar looking market, like I said when we kind of started the pre-market this morning, it all looks very, very similar with these pushes to new all-time highs, some type of shallow or 50 to 61.8% retracement of a leg, and then it continues into the next morning and pushes to new all-time highs again. But this one thing I'm noticing this morning is we have a little bit more of a case of bullish divergences off the overnight low and the lows from the day before than we do have the bearish case off the all-time high from 47.1175. So this morning we would expect a push to at least test the all-time high and potentially push to new all-time highs. That's what the signals would tell us this morning. Just keep in mind that we have to get through that all-time high. If we do get a little tick above by a point or 2 or 3 or a few ticks and there's a failure, it might mean that we could have a correction back to the lower end of the market. So there's a possibility there for that, but right now we're still interested in longs off pullbacks. And if they do come up and have trouble up here and start pulling back, there are going to be some levels up here that will be interesting to watch here going into the open. So if we get some type of pullback, we're going to be looking for longs off some of the important levels we have on the chart here. And also keep in mind, 89.75, 50% of the previous day, 87.50, 50% of the previous 4-hour candle that we watch. So staying above that is a bullish clue. Right now we're way above it. So any type of pullback, we'll be looking for longs. Also, our 200 and our 512 on our 512 chart also sloping up. It's above VWAP. We're way above both of those moving averages, so looking strong. Keep in mind on the pullbacks here, some really sexy levels to look for some potential longs, assuming we have a clear signal. So I will leave it at that for now, and then we'll jump over to our member section, see if we can get a trade or two off here coming into the open.